Hey, good people. Welcome to the Evolving Education Project podcast, hosted by me, Dr. Tiffany M, Nyachae, and friends, where we center the educational joys, passions, interests, and inquiries of people of color. This is episode 20. Coming up is a gathering of scholar activists exploring the challenges of balancing academic responsibilities with activist work. One guest asks, how do we do this and not die? Whew. We also discuss the importance of building genuine relationships with communities and the complexities of navigating the Chicago public school system. To begin, let's shout out the cities and towns of our newest listeners. We now have new listeners in Clifton Park, New York, Detroit, Michigan, Monticello, Kentucky, and Pearland, Texas. Our audience is growing, y'all. And we know that it is because of word of mouth. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We appreciate y'all for pressing play and listening in your car, at the gym, on your walk, wherever. Please continue to share this podcast with others. Today marks the beginning of our new series, And the Struggle Continues, which is inspired by Dr. David O. Stovall's book, Born Out of Struggle, Critical Race Theory, School Creation, and the Politics of Interruption. The context for this book is Chicago, Illinois. And the proclamation, we were born out of struggle and the struggle continues, often chanted by Little Village students in their fight for a quality education, ground this book and series. For this episode, join us for the Gathering of Scholar Activists, part 1 of the series. For this gathering, I am in conversation with scholar activists with close ties to Chicago, Dr. Erica R. Davila, Dr. Asia D. Reynolds, and Dr. Asif Wilson. Erica R. Davila is professor of educational leadership at Lewis University in Illinois, where she directs a doctoral program focused on transformative leadership. She started her teaching career as a middle school teacher in Chicago and Urbana, Illinois. Her dissertation research explored the lives of Puerto Ricans in Chicago public schools. Dr. Davila is a proud native of Chicago with Puerto Rican roots who earned her doctorate and master's degree in educational policy studies from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Aja D. Reynolds is an assistant professor in the teacher education department at Wayne State University. She received her doctorate degree in the Educational Policy Studies Social Foundations program at the University of Illinois at Chicago. With over 12 years of experience as an educator and youth worker, Dr. Reynolds' scholarly work has focused on her collaborative work in creating fugitive or freedom spaces with Black girls through the use of art, activism, and healing as she explores the geographies of Black girlhood. Aja is excited about continuing her work with educators and communities in sustaining freedom schooling for Black youth. Asif Wilson is an assistant professor of social studies education in the Department of Curriculum and Instruction at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. He started his career in education as a middle school social studies and science teacher in Chicago public schools. A 3-time alumnus of the University of Illinois Chicago, Dr. Wilson's scholarship invites educators in and outside of E20 educational settings to imagine and actualize more justice-centered pedagogical praxis, embodying his communal, loving, and transformative vision for education. Additionally, he recently received a Mellon Foundation Award in collaboration with the Chicago Public Library, which will support the digitization of Chicago's Black History archives and related educational support for local teachers and researchers. Okay, let's listen in on this convo. Tell us who you are so when they hear your voice, they know it's you talking. Tell us who you are, who's in this space so we know your voices when we hear you.
You want me to start? Hi, everyone. This is Erica Davila, coming from Chi-Town, born and bred. I am an educator. I teach in educational leadership with a background in middle school teaching, amongst other things. But I think that's enough for now.
Connect. Hello, y'all. Asia Reynolds, Dr. Asia Reynolds.
Don't we already know you? I hope you say how we already know you, Dr. Reynolds.
You said what?
Don't we already know you on the podcast? How do we already know you?
Because I was on some of the other ones.
Hey.
I'm a return offender. Assistant professor at Wayne State University in teacher education and doing work around Black girlhood, abolition, and all things Black education.
Good to be in space with y'all. Hi, my name is Asif Wilson. I'm an assistant professor of curriculum and instruction at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. I'm in Shy and do a lot of organizing here with teachers and families around education justice. And my work really looks at how social movements and professional learning influence teacher practice.
And also, I think you should tell us, like, you were really like in these schools before you became an assistant professor. So tell us, wasn't you a principal or an assistant? Let me let you say what you was really in the schools.
So I started off as a middle school social studies and science teacher at a school on the west side of Chicago until unfortunately that was closed, actually consolidated as part of the largest school closures in U.S. and world history in 2013. Then I moved into higher ed spaces and was visiting faculty a couple places, but I did have an administrative stint, I guess, since we're using these words, Dr. Reynolds, at City Colleges of Chicago, where I was administration. So I was director and then associate dean, and then finally, before I left, dean of instruction. So I have a pretty wide experience, did some nonprofit work too before that. Yes.
I'm excited. So I have to relax. I do this all the time. I need to relax. But the first thing I want to ask y'all about, because I know that you all are activists and not the activists that people throw around, but the word activist that people throw around. And I watch you and I see what you post on social media. I see how you are thinking about or in conversations. If you're not posting on social media, I see you in those spaces. A lot of things that's happening in the world right now, right? There's so much going on. It's so much going on. And when I think about this title for this series and the struggle continues, which is, we know, based off of Dr. David Stovall's book, I want to ask you all, how is the struggle continuing for y'all these days? And you could talk about it wherever way y'all want to go. This y'all show. So if y'all don't like my little questions, y'all just throw the question away and talk about what you want to talk about. But that's where I'm going to start. And y'all want to take it somewhere else, y'all take it wherever y'all want to go. That's how we do it here. Okay.
I'll go ahead and jump in real quick. So I think right now when I think about my work, it's twofold. What I think about in particularly activism or scholar activism or how those two maybe intersect at points. And so part of it is I think I have a responsibility to Black grad students who are coming through the programs, who want something different, who believe in something different than what the academy often offers, who want their work to be impactful and connected to community and grounded in those ways. And so I see just like a really deep responsibility to my relationship to particularly Black grad students and the work that they're doing and the ways that they're trying to make sure like they're ethical and it's connected to community and all of those things. The other part is, with my transition to Detroit, and I think I'm officially at 5 years of living here. It has been really, they had already been doing some really dope work with their youth, thinking about school abolition. And then so it's just been exciting to continue to join them in that journey in the different spaces here that just so happen to be Black girl led, where they're like wanting to understand really deeply, like what does abolition mean in theory and in practice, and what does this long history in Detroit looks like. And so I just been excited to be part of projects around that with them, and exploring abolition through political study, and how we're engaging in communities.
I'll jump in next, Asia, because I think my work is very similar as far as like what you said about grad students. It's something since I landed at Lewis, working in an EDD program after working for a long time with pre-service teachers. It was a shift for me, right? And it is a different kind of activism, and it's almost like I always think about is this like lifting the veil kind of thing, right? Because academia, A, is so white, and B, lacks so much transparency, right? So I work with mostly women of color in the doc program. I think that they come to me for obvious reasons. I mean, one is just there ain't nobody else. It's to give myself accolade. It's about our presence or lack of presence in these academic spaces. And just today, I was struggling getting through a Latina student's final dissertation chapters because she's leaning into some of her trauma, right, which a lot of us do in our research. And as I was reading it, it's so hard to think about like, how do you give students feedback, right, on their trauma? But also wanting her to succeed in the space where we struggle to fit in, right? Not just survive, but I want her to thrive, right? So balancing that, right? Giving her the authentic feedback and love, right, that students need when they do that work, but also reminding myself that she wants to end up in higher ed and I need to make sure she has those skill sets, right? So it's the conversation I have on the paper and then the conversation I have off the paper. And I never thought that my activism would look that way, right? Sitting at the crib reading student papers, right? But that is a big part of my job. And I do take pride in that work where I think the younger me would kind of turn my nose up at it, you know, and say like, how is this making change, right? Like used to being, you know, in the community, for lack of a better way of putting it, physically, right? And so what does it mean now to work with these, for the most part, younger folks who are coming through the system of higher ed with so much hope, but also so much fear and unfortunately lack of love, you know, and mentoring in these spaces.
Yeah, thank y'all for sharing. I think I'm wrestling with a number of different questions in this place now that I'm at in my personal life and my professional life. Having the prestige of a a R1 position, I think, is something that that folks that know about that, and I think that's all of us here. Like we aspire to like have that, the time and the resources and the access, right? And so I think in my fourth year of doing that, I'm wondering how do I create the work in partnership with folks, in partnership with the communities I work with and for, that is accessible to the communities I work with and for, all while still maintaining my the resources I have some access to, right? That we have access to because of my position at the university. Like we want to make a film, it's film crews, right? Like it's a podcast station. Those are things that come to mind. There's somebody to help me write grants. There's folks here to like book flights and whatnot. And so I think all of those mechanisms are resourceful to our activist work outside of the institution. And so I'm wrestling like, what does it mean to be of a space but not of a space? I think is related, but also a departure from my conversation around accessibility of the work that I create and that we create is like, how do you hold these dual identities, right? As both a scholar, a doctor, a professor, a researcher, but then an organizer, just a Black person, like somebody that could be in community. And I think those things sit in tension sometimes, right? And that's tension I'm trying to work through. And then I think the last thing I offer is like, how do I engage in all this work and not die? To be real about it, because when you look at faculty like us, like, and if I think about my mentors, they don't retire. They get sick, they pass away. Like I think about Bill Watkins all the time, like who like really committed to the struggle. I think about some of the exhaustion I see from our comrades now, like who are alive but like drained, and I feel that same drain too already so early, and I just am like, damn, it's not fatalistic, right? And that's the sort of organizing I was brought up in, is like, give it all to the struggle. And I think I'm learning that you don't have to give it all, you don't have to give your life to the struggle. So like the future of the struggle, or the struggle, and knowing that the struggle happens in perpetuity, means that like I can't give it all for this thing today, right? And I had to preserve my energy so I could be sustainable. This actually came from a conversation that Asia and a couple other folks and I had in at AESA, and somebody was like, "Damn, you need to slow down, homie." And I was like, "Yeah, I guess I do." They asked me, "How you gonna get to full?" And I was like, "I'm trying to get to associate." And they're like, "No, think about how you are doing this for the long run." So I think that that final question around how do I do this in ways that give me life instead of taking life from me is an important one I'm trying to wrestle with around struggle in the future.
Asif, that's, I mean, you just laid out the stage for the whole episode, because I'm just thinking about so many things about what everyone said, but how do we do this and not die? How do we do this and not die? And there's physical death, right? That can happen. And then there's just this I don't want my social justice spirit to die. Like I don't want to be complacent. You sit in these faculty meetings and you sit in these meetings and you just be hearing people just you have to be so strategic. Like, what am I going to fight and what am I not going to fight? And I'm not going to let white folks take my soul. You're not about to take up my energy. You're not about to take up my time. And then how do you, and then if those of us who, those of you who are organizers, I'm still understanding whether I am or am not an organizer. So I'm always like, I don't like to just throw, I don't like to call myself, like, I'm very confident that I'm a Black feminist pedagogue, and I could tell you, and I could write a whole paper about how I am a Black feminist, even womanist pedagogue, and I can understand that, and I can tell you why, and I can do all that. Sometimes I do think so I'm like really careful about just throwing out those terms, but I do see you all that way. But I'm saying, like, how do we do this and not die? You know, you see people in the hall, like, even when we talk about like relationships, and sometimes when we talk about people who are social justice and the critical circles, and then the poor relational practices that we see, is because they are unwell. Like, you're not taking care of yourself. I could tell you don't drink enough water. I could tell you don't sleep. I could tell you don't drink enough water. I could just look at people and tell. Like, you need to be drinking some water. You need to get you a good gallon a day. If you are doing activist work, and you are trying to also be a professor and deal with this stuff and get your publications and this stuff, you got to take care. You got to get some sleep. I'm like, I go to sleep. And sometimes you got to watch, like, you know, me and AJ always, we watch regular TV sometimes. Like, you know, you just got to, you got to do things that's not so, because it's your care, it's your state. And then what AJ and Erica was talking about, supporting these students, is work. I look at the grad students, and I'm always, I watch how the grad students of color, I'm always keeping a watchful eye over them, because I also want to watch how they, not surveilling them, but, you know, like how they attach themselves to this work. How are they, like, some of them, they just work. I get to the office at 8 a.m. You there. I come on a day because I got a deadline, and I just happen to, and I got people at my house, so I gotta hurry. I gotta go to my office. One time I had to finish something, and I went to my office it was like a vacation day, just because I had to turn something in. I don't be at the office like that. I don't. But I had to turn a manuscript in, and I saw docs. I'm like, no, come here. What you doing here? It ain't no. And you a first or second year. What are you doing? And I get the hustle. I get the hunger. I'm one of them people. I'm hungry, but I also can turn it off too. You have to you know. And I'm also learning, I don't know, this might not be good to say, but I'm also learning some of these students that I got to be like, I'm not the support for you. I know you're a student of color, and I know, and I'm gonna love you from afar, because I also think too, like, I think we need to talk to students about, and I see this a lot with students who, not who are really, really activists and organizers, but ones who like got all the social justice language down and they want to throw all of that around. It's like, you don't have, you don't have to get a PhD. I like what you were saying, Erica. Like, you also want her to do well and you want to prepare her. So if you don't want to do that level of work, boo boo, don't do it. Like, you don't have to, you can go get a job doing something else, and also, what you got to really do it though. You can't just talk all of this stuff and just talk stuff and do it, and then you got the ones who is just excellent and they just about to kill themselves. I'm just like, come here, little baby. How you doing? Come, let's go get something to eat. Did you eat today? Because so like, how do we, and I don't know what that is. I don't know. They're around us, like you said, Erica, it's not a lot of us around, right? And where I teach at, it's a very, y'all know this place. It's just like such a white town. And I don't know if they're doing that because they don't have community, because it ain't nothing else to do here but to do your work. That's why I said I'm definitely going to do what I need to do, because I ain't got nothing to do in this little town. These universities are in such isolated towns. You ain't got nothing to do but do your work. You gonna do your work because it ain't nothing else to do, right? But I do think, like, I wonder, I don't know how to, I'm still struggling with that, because I see them and I'm just like, is it because you don't have community and so you feel like this is what you need to do all the time? Or is somebody making you feel like you're inadequate and then you got to sit here and overread and over prepare for class and over this, that, and the other, but also like giving them their space. So it's just so much. And I thought about a lot about being in community. So how are you all, when we say things like, I think we use that a lot in our circles, that a lot of us go through, like being in community and being connected to community, and how am I reconciling my relationship to communities? What is that like for y'all now, and how are y'all doing that?
That's a great question. I was thinking about, even when we were talking about, like, I think some of the challenges that grad students face of not having community. Like, I feel like I'm continuously seeing the challenge of, and I mean, this could be COVID, this could be capitalism, this could be all things, of just how hard I think folks are finding time to carve out. Like, if we can't carve out space for myself, how am I carving out space for community? Right? Like, by the time I hit Friday, I can't, I don't want to now like clean my house and tell people to come over, right? Like, I done hit the wall and I just want to go home and be in silence. And I think that very much, so I think this also leads into what you're asking now too. Like, I think we often use this conversation, like you said, these words around community. And I think, like, we have to be clear about what community is, because especially when I think about the work of abolition and what it means to, like, hold each other accountable and hold each other in love. I think there's a lot of times we think that we're in community with folks, and so we don't understand why it's hard to reconcile and repair or heal or whatever, because we're not really in community. Right? And so I see for myself, at least, that, community is both broad and both like these different pockets. That looks like different where I'm at, right? Like, I have a community of folks, from the university, who I think are down folks who are doing work, who are in alignment with things that I believe that is part of a community. But then I'm part of my community, right? Like, I don't see myself as like just looking in on a community. I'm part of the community of the folks who literally live next door to me that I go and talk to. I actually live around a whole bunch of educators. And so it's just beautiful. Like, when I get to just check in and be like, how your class going? What you teaching this semester? Or, at your school. And then I have folks who are part of my political community. And I think that's like, they're not maybe all in community with each other, because that, once again, I think those pockets are happening in different places for me. But I have folks who are just part of my political community, that might be folks that is local, as well as folks who are national and global, who are in that I'm in conversation with. And for me, it's beyond just saying, identifying, saying like, these people I talk to. but it's folks who that I am committed to getting it right with.
Mm.
Right? It's folks that I'm committed to being in a right relationship with.
Mhm.
There are many folks that I don't care to be in right relationship with, right?
Mhm.
And I'm okay with the fact that like we may never have that, right? But there are folks who, if shit go left, that I know that I, even in my ego, even in the bruise, that I gotta be like, all right, how we gotta come back to this table, right?
Mhm.
And not just because of the work, right? But because the relationship is even more important and is actually the actual work, right? Like the relationship is the actual work. Everything else comes after that. And
Come
so
on.
it's the folks who that are like I'm consistently committed to being in a right relationship with, and I'm trying to get it right with, and I'm willing to build a new future with, right? Like that I am actively trying to build new futures with.
Mhm.
The relationship is the work. Mm.
Yeah, I don't know if that would add much to that outside of like folks that we can dream with and be learn accountability together and practice accountability together, but also remember together. And like I think about some of the work that we all have done and work we do in People's Education Movement in Chicago around remembering movements that have been erased, right? So we could share those in our dreaming and our future work with community too. So I think there's an ancestral component to this work.
Mhm.
And I actually, I've a lot in my brain right now, so I apologize if I can't articulate. But just this
Mhm.
idea of relationship, like I was thinking, like there's no way I would still be in higher ed without real relationships
Yep.
inside and outside of my institution. And just to give a shout out to Stove, who was on my dissertation committee over 20 years ago, like you have to continue to stay connected in real ways, right? So there's like the conference homie, like, hey, once a year, which is all good. We need them folks too. But there's also people who are connected to you in different ways, right? Like, and it's not always by geography, right? Because of spaces like this, and we've learned through like even Asia's research, right? Like how you could use these
Yeah.
spaces
Yep.
to connect to people in real ways, especially, through the pandemic. But I just think like there's just no way. Like I need people to ask me about my mama. I need the people who helped me get through having my nephew incarcerated. Like I need people who are going to check up on my cousin. Like it's family, right? And it is a very different, and I will say like Asia and Asif, being intentional, inviting people in, like they invited me into this beautiful writing retreat back in June. Like that saved me, y'all. Like it
Yep.
wasn't about the time we were sitting and writing. It was that too, but it was just being in community, breaking
Yep.
bread, laughing together. Like we need that so bad. And it's just like the gas, right? Like it's like when I came back, I'm like, okay, right? Like this isn't just me doing this work, right? Because it could be very isolating. But remembering those people who know you, I think is really important, like as a whole person, not just as
Mhm.
Dr. Davila.
Yeah.
I was gonna say Tiff too. I think it's so beautiful and intentional too. Like all of us who are on here in our relationship to Stove and talking about his book, because I think like that definitely him and both other Black women and women of color that was in the grad program at the time put me on this path of like really figuring out what community is,
Mhm.
especially in such a violent space like academia. Like I could have been like I would have probably been just like everybody else who think we got to be competitive, that
Yep.
all of y'all are my competition, that I can't collaborate or our relationships are transactional, right? Like everything that the academy is. But like those folks were just so generous and like was like let's just kick it like you know what I mean or come through to the like right we just went to Asa's wedding or we was just at another like it was like beyond just this moment of just like what are you working on
Mhm.
and how can I benefit from what you're working on.
And I appreciate you saying that because I'm gonna be very, very vulnerable right now. But I've had people say sometimes with me, like, I don't know, does Tiffany like me? Does Tiffany like me? And it's not that I don't like you, it's just that I'm a relational person. So if we don't have no relation. You know, it's not that I'm very polite. I think that I'm, you know, Asia noticed about me. Goldie says this about me too. Like, I'm very like nice. And sometimes people misread that as like I will be nice and I will say hello and I will and I will do all that. I'm not like I'm a kind person, but you're not about to play me. You're not like I'm not about to play with you either. You know, don't get it twisted. But also like I am a relational person, and if you're not relational, I don't know. I don't know. That doesn't mean I don't like you. It's just that I feel like you're just trying to be transactional, or you trying to get like if you just want to get I help people, you know, just say that. Like if you're not just say you want this. You know what I mean? But I think that it's a weird space for me, you know. I remember one time I was when I was a grad student, I didn't know none of these people. I didn't know. I always tell the story about how I met Stove was I didn't know these people. I came straight from the classroom because my principal pissed me off and I went down the street and said I was getting a PhD. So I didn't know these people was when I went to ARA, I didn't know who they were. I didn't know they was somebody big. So I heard this guy sound like a preacher in this group, but he was cussing. And I said, who is this guy over here preaching but cussing like every other word at this conference? So I went up to him. I didn't know who he was. I said, "Excuse me." He said, "Yes." I said, "Who are you? And what is your name? And where is you from?" Like he was, you know, I'm Dave Stover. I'm from Chicago. You know, yeah. I'm just like, oh my God. I tell the story all the time. But that's how I got to point to this story. That's how I met people. And so then as I kept going, I started to know a lot of people. And there was certain people who would watch me and be like, "Oh, she networks." And they kind of gave me that type of energy. I'm like, no, I'm not like out here like networking. Like, let's see, who do I have on my list today? I'm gonna connect with so and so, and I'm gonna connect with so and so and so and so. And I'm gonna act like we're BFF so that next time. I grew up in a small Black church, and you spoke to people. If somebody gave my mother's evangelist missionary. Somebody gave a good word, you go up and you give them a hug and say how you doing. Like that's what I was doing, and I met more people, and so I do think like because it's not a lot of people like that. Those of us who move in more relational ways, even if it's not exactly how I do it, but we move in more relational, people don't understand that, and then they don't know how to read you, and then they start making stuff out of it. And I'm just like, it's not all that. Why don't you invite me to tea and we could talk? Let's get to know each other. Don't just come up here. And it's really a weird space. It's really a weird space. And then I feel like when you are moving authentically, you are hyper watched because they're not used to people moving authentically. Like sometimes I feel like so surveilled. Like I can't even emote without people watching and it's white people, but it's not just white people. It's people of color who are not comfortable moving authentically, right? And not relational. Yeah. So it's like some people are like, I can't believe you said that. I'd be like, what did I say? Like, she not about to play with me. And guess what? And I still get respected because you can't, it never works. I'm disposable. Like Asia always said it, like I'm disposable. So like, I can either sit here and act like, you know, let you do whatever you want and then just go along with it. Or I can just, I'm kind, I'm a good colleague, I do what I'm supposed to do, but you're not about to play with me. And then we're going to respect each other and we're going to move forward. So I think that's where I struggle with people. But I don't care, but I'm just like, I just find that interesting that because I'm not moving in these particular ways, then I don't like you. You know what I mean? I don't know. It's just weird. I don't know. It's just a weird space. The other question I wanted to ask, did any of you, so I know, what is your connection to Chicago and either the Chicago public school systems, whether you grew up in Chicago public schools or you worked there or you had some work there, like in different ways? What's your connection? And I'll make this a two-parter so you can go wherever you want. And what do you see happening in Chicago public schools today?
How much time you got now? I was born in Chicago and spent, I think five years here, and then I grew up in the southern suburbs of Chicago. And so I think that gives me, I was reading Gloria Anzaldua's work around like neither here nor there. And so I kind of feel like I'm in that. And I like, you have to be authentic as a Chicagoan. You can't say you from Chi and you from the burbs, right? So you have to be real about that. And then I think what that means for me and my relationships and my work here in Chicago, being a Chicago public schools teacher and someone who does a lot of organizing here in education organizing here in Chicago, is like understand the limitations of my experience, right? So I can't speak from the experience of being a Chicago public school student. And I own that. I name it. I'm vulnerable. And I think back to our question before around community. If you're in community, you know where you are, right? You know your assets, but also you know where you need to move back and be in partnership with folks to offer to hear and understand and learn from their contributions and experiences. And so I think organizing has taught me that, right? That, we're all have these dual positionalities in many ways in the world. And like, we gotta name them, but also figure out how to move through them. And in the spaces where we don't have experience, figure out how we learn from those with experience.
Oh, that's a loaded question, Tim. I did go through the CPS system as a student, but I only taught in CPS for 1 year. So I don't have that perspective so much from the educator perspective, right? But K-12, went through the system. But as a researcher, like one of the things I remember very early on was, and a lot of us do this, right? You start thinking about your own lived experience, right? So I'm reading about, all the activism it took to get bilingual education, or just, anything having to do with the Latino culture, Puerto Rican culture in the schools, like as far as curriculum and things like that. And, again, as a scholar, right, looking at that and you're like, oh shit, yeah, like, okay, I was in this grade, I was in that grade, and one of the statistics that always stood out, and I put this in my dissertation, which was focused on Puerto Rican students in the Chicago public schools, was that, William Bennett, the Secretary of Education at the time in 1980, I want to say, basically deemed the Chicago public schools the worst in the nation. And so what I tried to do was lean into that to do a counter narrative, right? As a critical race scholar, saying, wait a minute, hold up, right? That's the system that made me. So problematizing that, right? Having critique of the system, right? But then also being able to navigate what I gained from those spaces. Like one of the things I always like to share as a student, a product of bilingual education, was I was placed in bilingual education because of deficit ideologies, right? When I came to school as a whole, full bilingual person, basically for the school, it wasn't enough English, right? So they put me in bilingual ed. But for me, that was amazing because from kindergarten to third grade, I had the most culturally responsive education that a student could probably have, right? Like the teachers, the students, everybody looked, sounded like me, etc. So that was part of my real early experience with CPS. And then again, as a researcher looking at, for lack of a better word, the fuckery of what they had done, to Latino students in particular. That's what my research was focused on, even though the story of Black students in CPS is also one that we need to highlight, the inequities that the system has perpetrated. And then I also experienced it as an aunt, right? So like my nephews went through the system and now they're grown. And so just seeing their experience, like mostly in the 90s, right? And like how they experienced it as boys of color, going through a system that had not changed that much since like when I went to school, right? So I got to see it from that like intergenerational perspective. I left Chicago in '05 to Philadelphia for 10 years. So coming back was like a whole other story, right? Of coming back in the moment that we were in Chicago, at the height of the school closures, at the height of the activism, the hunger strike. I mean, all of this was happening when I was returning back home. And so it's so much part of how I think, of what I do, who I advocate for. It's always there, some way, shape, or form in my research and my teaching, I would argue as well.
I got to Chicago in 2012. And I feel like it was like a Hallmark story. The girl that comes from the small town to the big city on an adventure. Like, go on an adventure. I want to do some new shit. I want to meet new people. I'm tired
And
of
what small town are you from, Aja?
Pennsylvania. Always
Where?
Stilton, Pennsylvania.
Oh. Hmm.
Always proud. But and I was clear. I was coming to Chicago for 2 years for a master's program, and I was getting out of there, right? Like I just want this big city experience. I got to Chicago in 2012. Wait, 2012? No, I got to Chicago in 2010, and Chicago represented a rebirth for me.
Hmm.
I think everything, my like little heart always felt like the little rebel spirit that always existed. Um, was able to like break free in Chicago. Like I think I had this idea that I was going to the big city to get a big city life, and I just think fate and God had something else for me,
Hmm.
and and I didn't know that's what I was going to get. But like I never had the language to say like what it meant to grow up in Stilton, Pennsylvania, or Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And I think I remember one time meeting a Black woman researcher scholar who did research for years in Harrisburg. And she said to me, she was like, Harrisburg's really interesting. It's like most people don't understand that it's a majority Black space, but it's conservative. And her saying that for me really helped me understand why I always felt like this tension in that space. And so, when I got to Chicago, I got Dave Stovall as my professor. I got Pauline Littman. I got Rico. Like, I have these heavy hitter, both scholars, but also because they're heavy hitters, because also the work that they actually commit to in their communities and the works that they're doing that come before all of that, right? So I didn't have a chance to understand academia necessarily through a traditional lens from the get go, right? My professors are like, meet me at the protest. I'm like, that's where we at today. Like, and didn't Chicago was about to get ready for one of the largest teacher strike, right? And so I
Yep.
came into that space already that was so fired up and so ready to go. And the people that I just kept running into had that same spirit and that same heart. And so in one of my first jobs in Chicago was a college advisor. I worked for the college advising corps, and we used to have to go into different schools, both in the city and outside the city, where we had some of our partnerships, to check on the college advisors that were on the ground. And so it was just an eye-opening experience for me. Like I was in Diet, I was in Crane, right? Two of the schools that got closed. So like I just remember seeing that whole transition of how they got depopulated, how people got pushed out, teachers got pushed out of space. Like I was like watching this thing happening, right? While also in the classroom learning language, learning about neoliberalism, learning all these things. So it was like I always understood neoliberalism as this intimate thing of that actually really harm people beyond just this idea of a theory. And so, I ended up in Chicago for 10 years. um, and I like I said, I just think I was meant to be there. Like it was the right time, and that I needed to go through a different journey in my life of what I was believing and thinking and trying to learn and figure out. And I found that community there. And I was able to understand anti-Blackness in real ways.
Mm.
Chicago really brought home for me anti-Blackness. I remember the first time I went to a city council meeting, and I was taken back by how many of the aldermen and alderwomen or whatever, alder people were people of color, right? Like Chicago is the reason that right now I can't be excited about what's happening with the election, right? Because I
I'm gonna
remember
bring
being
that
in a
up.
Democratic city. I remember going to me like I'm from a place where most like even with people of color, like white people still got power, right? Like the few white people there are still holding power. So like I'm thinking I'm going to city council meeting, it's gonna be all these old white dudes, and I go in and I'm like, it's people of color in here. And then I go to the school board meetings, and like Common's mom is on the school board. Like I'm like, huh. So it's like this I had to really like be like, what does it mean to live in a democratic city with black and brown leadership at the forefront and all this harm that is happening to black children?
It sounds like something that may be happening today
Rough.
that people are really excited about, but it's a conservative agenda.
Mm.
What could I be talking about? Like, it's just like it's still a conservative agenda, even when you see Black people. You have to know. That's why we have to know. I tell people all the time, I love seeing Black people and I love all of that, but I got to hear your politics because and I think when you come from, like, I feel like, and like I'm even thinking about, Erica, what you were saying about the bilingual program. I went to a bilingual school in Buffalo, New York. We had a huge Puerto Rican population and they had their own school. Like I grew up in all of that, right? And I'm just thinking about when you're in these towns, that when you grow up in a town that has people of color in power, but they're very, very conservative, or you grow up in a town where it's a lot of people of color, but the white people are still in power, then you go and you see all of these people of color and you're just like, oh my God, I just really romanticized it. I just thought, like, I know y'all about to be doing the real work. Even working in the academy, I don't know. I think it's my working class background too, that I think I have tensions with in the academy when I come across other people of color in the academy. And it's not that you should be ashamed of that you didn't grow up working class, but or experiencing poverty, but I see differences in our politics, and I see, like, even being judged the way I speak. Like, I don't code switch. I don't like people looking at me sideways because I don't talk different when I'm getting around the white people, or or whatever. I'm just like, da 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 da, and I just talk. And so I think, like, I appreciate what Asif what you were saying about Nate. What I would like to see. I'm actually going to do a little show about this, or it might air be right before y'all show, about even us being critical scholars and doing this work. We have to be very honest about where we grew up and how we grew up. And just because you slapping social justice on it, like the class thing, like, I just be like, you have no understanding of even
Tiff, you say it all the time. Like, you consistently say it, and makes me be like all the time about class. Like, we don't talk enough about class.
And it's like, you didn't, even in our studies, like, I'm about to say this and people, y'all may be mad. Y'all might have heard it. If I aired before this one, you probably heard it. Like, you writing all of these big claims about how to teach kids in school, Black kids and brown kids and all of this in schools, and this your framework. And your study consists of the little good kids from the suburbs who ain't nobody struggling with. You know what I'm saying? I'm just saying. I'm not saying, or you have this very elitist way you allow kids of color to participate in your study. So kids who participate in your study, your critical this and your social justice this, these usually the top kids in the school. So they have a particular acumen, with language and all of this type of stuff. They're these, and I'm not, and that's okay. Name that. I'm not saying that gifted Black kids, if you want to call it, I have tensions with that word, but if you want to have, maybe I would feel different if I had been able to get into the gifted program. Maybe that's what it is. But I'm saying, like, if you, say that, be very honest. Like, where do your kids come from? How did they get access to your program? And I'm somebody, when I do workshop with kids, and this is just, and that's why I know that it's different. If I do research or workshop, whoever's come, can your mama get you here? I need to pick you up. Whoever is willing and able, that's who I accept. It don't make me more important than you. It don't make my work. I'm not saying that my work, I'm more social justice than you, but you need to name that, because those kids that I'm working with in my research study and the research findings is very different than the kids that, they had to take a test before they could get in your critical space. I mean, we don't talk like that. That's a lot. Okay, I didn't mean to go in that direction.
We got to do a better job of practicing naming the contradictions. I think for Black folks and folks of color, it's nuanced, because we can't be our whole selves in front of everybody and share all those vulnerabilities because they're perceived as deficits, right? And we know we had to work twice as hard or 3 times. All that stuff our parents told us is absolutely true. But we also, like, we need to name the contradictions. Like, I need to name that when I show up to an action, I'm technically getting paid for that. Them elders, them young people, they ain't getting broke off of that. right? And so we think about capacities. It's not just time to come to a thing. It's like, the other sort of contours of my participation are things that are contradictions in life, and that are my privileges as a professor. Like professors be taking some good vacations, right? Like I'm guilty of that too. And so, like, how do you name those? How do you name those contradictions? Yes, we need rest, right? But in many ways, we are privileged by class, right? That gives us access, that gives us opportunity. Having a doctor or a PhD following our names, or an EDD following our names, gives us opportunity, access, relationships that some folks that look like us, that we be in community with, don't have, right? And I think I've been noticing, like, slick shit, a lot of slick shit. Like, even, like, how often do the co-authors of my research really get co-author credit? Like, do I really hold myself accountable to finding the publication outlets that allow me to list, everybody that worked on this project is a co-author? Or is it the thing, you got to have a ORCID, and if you don't have that, or you don't have the technical skills, then you're not technically a co-author, or you're a contributor, or we give you some affirmation and acknowledgement. And so, like, there's all these things that are built into our profession that are so extractive and so divisive, right? That I think naming the contradictions maybe is a start. I don't know what the future holds for that work, but certainly we got to do a better job of naming the shit that we be on.
Yeah.
And it's a disservice when we don't, right? Like, I said this before in another space of, like, when we try to do the whole thing of, like, I just want to seem like I'm a common person like everybody else, and that's disingenuous. Like, I'm not letting you now get access to things that you should have access to, right? Like, you don't know now that you could have had access to things all this time, or been asking me different things because I'm trying to too busy seem common and play down actually what social capital I just walked in here with, right? Whenever I'm working with young folks, there's no reason that I'm working with young folks who and they want to go to college that I am not helping them get there. I don't care what the project is. There's no, and this goes with jobs. This, like, there's no way that I'm working with young folks and I have this much access and they need something and I can't make sure I get them that.
Don't get me started, because I got a lot to say about literacy as a literacy scholar. And I'm sick of these critical literacy scholars. I am going to have a separate thing where I'm just going to talk my stuff. I grew up in church. It's hard for me to cuss, but I want to say the other word. But but I don't judge people because I think cussing is great. It's just I sound whack when I do it. But I want to I do. I really want to. I'm a practice so I could cuss. But that's my goal, to cuss fluently. That's my goal this year. That's gonna be my goal. Okay, let me stop. I do think that I get so frustrated with, like, in my fields, like, the critical people that, can we be real that our kids, you could do critical stuff all day and that's very important, and social justice, all that. They want to know how to read. They want to know how to read. You ain't gonna be with me. We gonna talk about social justice stuff, but baby, if you can't read with Dr. Nyachae and she doing a workshop, I'm gonna tell your mama to bring you here an hour or two early than the rest of the kids. Okay? And I'm gonna work with you. We're gonna work on that reading. And then you gonna still be a part of the social justice stuff. Right? You still gonna be, and, like, that's the part that I get angry about, because I'm also like, and it's usually people who do this type of work that you don't know what that's like. You didn't struggle to read. So you just assume you just gonna put a beautiful, text in front of somebody, right? And we're always learning how to read. So maybe you can read words, and then, but what type of reading do we want our doc students to be able to do? Like, I scaffold them about writing and reading. I want you to be able to come here and do your, I tell them, like, you're about to read this text and this part is going to be hard and she's going to do a metaphor right here, but stick with it, boo. And and if you need to skip this one paragraph and go back and we're going to talk about it. You know what I mean? Like, you're always learning how to do all of these things different ways. And I think sometimes we're privileged and we got it, or we worked hard to get it, And we forget what it's like when you lost, right? And it goes from the babies to the students of color that we work with in these programs, right? And and they appreciate that. You think it's like, but they'll, I've had students say, nobody ever told me like how to synthesize. You know what I mean? Like they want to do that, and it's not colonized to teach them how to do that. I think sometimes people be like, you just write, do this is what I asked them first, like you said, Erica. Do you want a higher ed job? Because I'm a mentor you differently. Whatever you want to do is your world. Do you want this type of job? You want to work here? You want to work at an R1? Okay, that's a different mentoring, right? You want to do this, you want to do that. And so I just wish, because I don't think that's doing social justice work if at the end of the day you don't care that they have this. I'm not talking about to be in this oppressive system. They want to know how to read. You know what I'm saying? Like, they want to read. It's what they want. It's not, nobody want to sit here and don't know what's going on. Okay, I'm done. Somebody say a cuss word for me so I could really like the impact of my passion.
Yeah.
What, please?
You off, I think. Did I cut you off?
I wanted, no, it's all good. I just wanted to, yes, and
Yes.
the social class thing, I wanted to bring it back, right? Because look, let me tell you, I've been in academia for 20 years, 20 fucking years there. Is that helping to?
Ooh.
And sometimes it's like, whoa, right? But like, I've always worked at smaller schools. I always have to front for conferences. So think about what that means, right? Like, think about all of these scholars who are doing what is their job to do, right? In order to get promotions and get paid, keep a job, right? Is go to these conferences, right? And so that system has to change. And what I wanted to say is, as we kind of flow up, right? And I always talk to my students about this, like, we're very early in critical scholars of color being in leadership. This is a new thing, right?
Yes.
I would say like Gloria Latson Billy, right? Like, she's still in the game, and she's like first gen doing this kind of work, right? I would also argue like Tatum, right? Who was president of Spelman. Like, those kinds of people, like, which is us, right? We need to also change that, because it is such a classist space. I talked about earlier, being a white space. It's so classist. And, we also have to complicate this first gen thing, because first gen ain't the same for everybody. Okay.
Thank you.
Important to mention it. I literally had a student try to throw this in my face talking about first gen because her parents didn't have doctorates. And I said, hold the fuck up. I said, my mama got an 8th grade education. Do you think I'm always like, pay my tuition? Was what she was arguing. The point is, it's a whole other conversation. The point is that the space needs to change. You need to stop paying for your own books. You need to stop paying for your own conferences. At least I know we have to do it in the interim, but institution by institution, pushing on those folks who have the money. They have the money, right? And it's not always like, I have a really close colleague of mine who's at an R1, and she usually gets all the funding. So this November, we were all supposed to go to Mexico for ICUE. None of us got funding. 4 women of color. We got our proposal accepted. None of us got funding. So we're like, fuck it, we ain't going, right? So the one in R1 space, right? Like, she was the one that had the card, right? And now it's like, oh, wait, we got a little deficit. So the first thing we're going to do is cut off funding. What the fuck is that? Right? And so what I'm saying is, sorry, you gave me permission to curse. It's,
Yes, it's lovely. It's glorious. I'm enjoying it.
Worry when you're talking about the church, because church.
No, I love it. I wish I could just flow. I'm a practice.
Yes, so practice. So all I'm saying is we need to change that, and we need to rethink. I've seen Asif do it. I've seen Asia do it, specifically like with Communiversity, right? Like, and I know closer Asif's work here in Chicago, like, he's like, we need to feed folks, we need to pay folks, we need to get folks there, right? Mm-hmm. Like, we can't be doing this work without those basic needs being met. They need to be compensated for their time, period. If not, they need to stop being part of these little research projects, because we have scholars literally on the backs of our people with all this trauma porn, or whatever the term is people are using these days, and then basically, getting all their accolades. while in the meantime, those people are still in their trauma, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's something Stovall talks about too, right? Is like really being careful. And I really appreciate Dave for doing that. And he's so intentional, like about sharing those stories, right? You know, of the people. And so really rethinking how we share those stories, who's sharing those stories. Not everybody should share those stories, right? That's the other thing too.
Okay. Y'all.
I feel like I took a lot of space there at the end.
No, you took. If you don't stop, next time I see you, I'm gonna do an intervention. Now you done apologize 5 times. No. Okay.
Like it's the
And
Catholic.
then I'm gonna help you with that, and you're gonna help me with cussing, and we're gonna be good.
Yeah.
The other thing is final thoughts. I love y'all. This was so beautiful. Yeah, I'm so excited. Thank y'all. You can give me a last little show some love, and then y'all get off because I know y'all got to go.
I want to say thank you.
Big appreciations.
Yes. Big appreciations. I'm gonna start saying that. That's so cool. I'm gonna say that. Okay. You want to say something, Aja? No, you good.
I'm glad to see that you were able to come back into a different space to bring back the podcast.
Thank you.
Proud of you, sis.
Thank you so much. It was a struggle doing you know what, and you just get off. You got to get off. But being a professor and trying to get on the tenure and doing the tenure, then I was doing them grants, applying for these grants and trying to make it so that they even read it. It is a lot, and I was trying to keep up. But this is the work I feel like I'm supposed to be doing. I always would call my mom, should I quit this? Because it's hard. And my mother said, no. You don't quit that podcast. I said, I think I shouldn't be doing it because it's hard. No, don't quit that. Don't quit that. You know, that's somebody I listen to. My boo, Deuce. No, babe, you don't quit that. You do. I'm like, okay, Deuce. Okay. But you know, it's hard being a professor. Like you were saying, Asif, like when you were saying all of that, that's my testimony with this podcast. And being absent for 3 years from it and trying to figure it out, and you want to do it. And I believe the purpose of it, the reason why I felt like this was for me to do, because I want to make these conversations accessible outside of the academy. When I go to Buffalo and I go to a store, because I grew up there, they ask me every question in the book. So come here, Dr. Nyachae, because you got a doctor, like you said, the privilege. I'm supposed to be an expert on everything on Black people, people of color.
Getting into every college.
Listen, colonization, schools. Like I do think like that's the thing. And because those were my experiences when I would go places and I would go all of it, people would want to talk to me about everything because you got a doctorate and we see you posting critical stuff on social media and all of this, that it's like they want to be a part of these conversations. They want to, and I don't just invite us. I invite like a lot of people, like different people in different spaces. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to have a PhD, but I do feel called to do that. And I hope that when I was a classroom teacher, I wanted access to conversations like this. My mind was thinking about a lot of things and we didn't have it, right? I wasn't in Chicago. But that's what I'm doing. I want all of us to think about some important questions and reminders from this episode. Dr. Aja Reynolds pushed us to consider, who are the folks that you are committed to getting it right with? It is important to be clear about this because when we find ourselves unable to reconcile and repair relationships when doing justice work, it is often because we are not really, quote unquote, in community with those folks. And as we do this justice work, Dr. Asif Wilson calls us to ponder over, how do I do this in ways that give me life? Those of us who consider ourselves to be scholar activists, we must maintain our wellness in activist and organizing work. That is just as important as the work. You can't forget that. Drink your water, get your sleep, move your body, and take care of your body. Because as Dr. Wilson tells us, we do not have to give our whole life to the struggle. And I hope that's a reminder to any of our activists and organizers that are listening. Thank you for listening to part 1 of our And the Struggle Continues series. If something from this episode resonates with you, please share it with others and let us know through our website, evolvingeducationproject.com. Be sure to tune in for part 2 next Wednesday, where we interview Dr. David Stovall about his book, Born Out of Struggle, Critical Race Theory, School Creation, and the Politics of Interruption. Trust, you do not want to miss that. To find out more about the Evolving Education Project, to write in, or to join our listserv, check us out at evolvingeducationproject.com. And please subscribe to this podcast and follow us on Instagram, X, and Facebook. If you can only choose one, please follow us on Instagram and love all of our posts. Support that doesn't cost a dime. If you've been enjoying our podcast, you can also support us by writing a review. Favorable reviews help more educators, organizers, families, communities, and activists find us. We hope to continue to cultivate an authentic audience and community. We want you to help us to evolve over time and shape what this could be. Now that you know what we're about, let us know what you want to learn more about, authors that you would like us to interview, discussions you would like to have. Okay, that's all for now, good people. Tune in next Wednesday for a new episode. We out.